Oh, God. Oh my God, I love seeing you all. I promise I wouldn't cry, but I'm not going to. I thank you everyone for coming. Thank you everyone for showing up for the last 25 years of my life. And I mean, you all know the kind of work that we do and the world that we're trying to create and what we're trying to survive out there. And tonight is about celebrating and drinking and having kebabs and samosas and dancing and having a talent show. Um, no, but we're gonna do all those things. And, but I'm just so happy you're here. And yeah, without further ado, I will keep sharing and thanking people throughout the night. But I first will, of course, thank the Asian American Writers Workshop. I mean, look at this amazing space surrounded by books. I only had to think about it for 1 second where I wanted to have this book launch, and it was here. The staff, Sophia, who you just met, Tiffany, Ken, everyone's just been amazing. There's all these people who volunteered tonight. Thank you for the South Asian Women's Creative Collective for helping fund and for everything you do. To poets and writers, for the Asian Pacific American Institute at NYU, and all of you. That's it. I am going to first introduce Quincy, who I have been a fan of for so many years, since we met 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I don't even know. His book, The T-Bone Series, I loved it the first time I read it, and then we started performing together, and it was when I was trying to stop being a high school teacher, and I started to do this reading series called Notice to get up the courage to give up notice. And so we did upset readings, we did notice readings, and it was fabulous. So I'm so happy that you can be here tonight. So Quincy.
Thank you. How to dance during a riot. For Michael Brown in Ferguson, for Freddie Gray in Baltimore, for a city near you. Get up. Get on up. Get your hands up. Show 'em up. Put 'em up. Get your hands up. Shake it to the south, to the east, to the west. Put 'em up, complying, not resisting arrest. Shout demands to the DJ, James Brown, Motown, say it loud. Shooting for a run now. Move the crowd. Do what I say now. Left foot stomp, right foot stomp. Ain't nothing going on but a peaceful protest. Ain't nothing going on but civil unrest. Move it like a pusher, a pedestrian, a president. Shake it like a stun grenade going off in a residence. Shake it like a shot. Shake it like a, shake it like a, shake it like a shake. Wow, good morning. Shake it like a stun grenade going off in a residence. Shake it like a shakedown, lock up by the Fed. Bounce like a bullet off a grandma's head. Get down like you're doing what the officer said. Just get back up before they think you're dead. Get your hands up. Get your hands up. Get your hands up. Get 'em up. I really want to thank you, Bushra. Thank you so much for everything you've done over the years. Thank you so much for this book, and thank you for having me here and being be part of this. Thank you guys. You could be anywhere in the world and you're here. I really appreciate that. Thank you, World Wide Web, wherever you are. And thank you, Asian American Workshop. I'm a big fan of the Asian American Workshop, especially your program directors. I married one of them. Here's a poem about her. How to be black in an airport with your Indian wife. First, I button up my professor vest, my, why yes, I am an African-American professor vest. I'm not a real professor. Technically I teach part-time. Later in line, I unbutton my vest, put my belt in the bin, so now my pants are sagging. and all my paper and pen, so now I can't read nor write. And I take a deep breath, because this is where I worry about my wife. See, this ain't no well-lit cafe or high-end retail store. This ain't a cool summer breeze on white concrete. My wife's not trying to keep from stomping her feet. Fearing an open argument with a black man is an open call for cops to come throw me to the ground, cuff my throat, grind the sidewalk into my ear, all of which hasn't actually happened yet. But if it did, I'd probably still lose our argument. But nah, this ain't it. The TSA checks and rechecks my wife's ID, asks her to remove her sari, which is a Marc Jacob, Ralph Lauren trench coat, and unwrap her tuni, a Marc Jacob scarf, and then scoff in silence as they push our stuff on through. And even though these post-9/11 lines ain't nothing new, and even though the whole ordeal lasts like maybe a minute or two, and even though it takes longer for me to hop across the carpet and retie my shoe, I swear, when it comes to my wife, even the body scanner grows more suspicious. Its sweeping bar slows to trace her every inch and curve, as if the darkness of her hair could decompress the cabin, as if the daisy in her skin could turn the sky to ash. All this to say, I'm sorry, baby. This was supposed to be our revolution love song, but the only real turbulence we feel is in the air with everybody else. The plane shakes me awake. Your grip tightens around my hand. I turn to you and say, Nina, please understand, I am not 3/5 economy class. Your Punjabi needs not to be patted down. Those are concerns for the ground. With the dot busters and the killer cops, the racism doubters and the follow me shops, here we are 33A and 33B. Fly or fall, we are free. And you can trust me, baby, because I'm your husband, I love you, and I'm Professor. One more? Can I read a new one? Yes. You sure? Yes. If it sucks, it's your fault. Are we gonna dance tonight? Yes. Are we gonna dance tonight? Yes. You might have to dance without me. I got school in the morning. I'm getting old. Thank you so much. I pulled you out when you were leaving school. I'm started teaching school, so thank you for pulling me out to do this reading. Thank you so much for being here. In honor of DJs everywhere, in honor of spaces where we used to dance and dance no more, I present to you How to Get Down Like James Brown. Huh! 1 time! Huh! 2 times now! This ain't no funeral. Put your body into it. They want to fall, but it's a getting back up. Show the world who's boss. Bring the earth to your feet. 3 times now! This ain't no black and white archive live television show. You can't hear the audience screams while they can only wish you were talking to them. They wish they could comprehend the howls and wails and whispers in between. How you be preacher and creature and sex machine and pray. How you pray like paradise is on fire and rise, though they be thinking you're still on your knees. Hit me! They will claw and yell for 1/8 of your note. Wish they could dive into your hair, ride the rapids of your brow, drape a cape and soar with you with every step kissing. Please, 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 please. While you pretend to walk away, while you pretend the spirit is taking you over, but you can't bear to leave the stage, but that's not how you and the spirit do. Come on now, clap your hands. Stomp your feet. Clap your hands. Stomp your feet. In the jungle, brothers. In the jungle. You were born in the fires of former plantations. You know the coldness of lights on Christmas Day. And they'll say, hardest working man, while I cut eyes to your feet. And they'll pull at Papa's new clothes until they can call them their own. And they'll scream when you say, hit me! Scream when you say, hit me! Scream when you say, hit me! And they'll dance their muffled asses to say it loud. Twerking and jerking them, taking them up all the floor, pushing you to the corners, to the shadows, right to the edge, making you disappear like the jungles. But please, 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 please don't go. Don't leave me in the fader. Don't run to another track. Don't stop in the quiet of in between. Come on, I know you're out there. Clap your hands. Stomp your feet. Clap your hands. Stomp your feet. Clap your hands. Stomp.
Okay, I'm a little ready more to look at you all now. Hi. I grew up in a South Asian family. I'm not used to getting a lot of love directed at me this way. But Quincy, you know what I love? You know, I went to, of course, Nina and Quincy's wedding, all 3 days. And what I love is that one day literary historians are going to look back and be like, why is Bushra in the Jones family portrait? Because I got pulled into your family, your whole family was together. They're like, come on in. And the people are going to be so confused about that one day. No, but we've shared a lot of great memories. I mean, talk about community. When I was like super pregnant and traveling from deep Brooklyn to the South Bronx to teach, I would stop at Nina and Quincy's house halfway just to like rest because I was so pregnant. And just, I mean, that's, I mean, all of you, so many of you, this chosen family that we've created. I'm gonna stop again. Okay, so I am so excited to introduce our next reader, Sadia Shepard. I've known of Sadia's work through Kundiman. Anyone here familiar with Kundiman? Woohoo! Another fabulous organization that we're so lucky to have. But then recently, I don't know how many of you heard, this is gonna be my drunk literary history version of what happened last winter. If you've heard of the Francine Prose situation that developed at the New Yorker, don't worry, I'm gonna fill you in and I'm probably gonna get it wrong and maybe Sadia can correct me. But basically, Sadia published a fabulous story in the New Yorker. Francine Prose, who, for those of you, I love my friends from high school who are like, who's she? I love that question. She's like, considers herself the grande dame, maybe, of this white literary elitist New Yorker thing. And she called out Sadia and was like, this story is plagiarized, although Sadia had clearly said this was an homage to Mavis Gallant. But it turned into this whole thing, and it just kind of pointed out, like, why would Francine Prose attack a Pakistani American Jewish writer who's publishing her story in the New Yorker? It made me so angry. And I knew that we were going to do this event, and I said, you know, we don't need the New Yorker. We don't need Francine Prose. Come out, and would you please read at my book launch? So thank you, Sadia, for agreeing. Come on. Okay, thank you.
I'm so honored to be here this evening. I can't even tell you. I have admired Bushra for a long time, and when she reached out to me and said, sort of as an act of solidarity, that she wanted to me to be a part of this celebration, I was deeply moved. And also just want to say on a personal note, there are people here who reached out to me during that very strange episode that Bushra referenced, many of whom I'm meeting for the first time tonight, Bushra is clearly a community builder and a nurturer, and it feels especially appropriate to return to the Asian American Writers Workshop, which for so many of us here in this room has been a tremendous source of inspiration and a kind of a second home to so many writers. So it is very special to return here tonight. Because this is a return, and also I also want to say the other thing, you know, I've really been quite taken with Bushra's work in prose for a very long time. I'm now getting to know her poetry also, and I feel that I'm a slow writer, and to see long projects come to fruition and to find new forms and to meet other writers working in multiple media is also very exciting. Some years ago now, in 2011, I took my very first fiction workshop in this room with a wonderful writer called Marianna. And I was in the midst, I was trained as a documentary filmmaker, and I was trying to figure out what to do with some of these other ideas that didn't make sense as films. And I took this 6-week workshop, and I was utterly inspired, and also to be surrounded by all these tremendous books of the Asian American experience. And I was sort of wrestling with something that had happened to me a couple years ago, which was that my late mother and I were traveling between Karachi and New York. We were on a PIA flight. It was a common, it was a flight we were pretty familiar with. And in the middle of the night, the sort of dulcet sounds of the pilot came on, and he said, "Oh, nothing to be concerned about. Just want to let you know we're experiencing a little turbulence, and we're going to be making an emergency landing in Paris." And we were utterly freaked out. I mean, so what is a plane full of Pakistanis we're like, we aren't going to Manchester, we're now going to Paris? And so, of course, we thought the worst, and it was terrifying. And then became very strange. So we landed, 180-something of us, in Paris, to discover that we were marooned there thanks to the volcanic ash cloud that was spreading across northern Europe. I don't know how many of you guys remember this, but in 2009 there was a volcano that erupted in Iceland and grounded every flight between Ireland and Spain. And there we were stuck with our entire flight. And so I had been trying to figure out what to do with this experience, and had tried to write it from my own perspective, and that didn't quite work. And then along came the safe space of AAWW. And I thought, And one thing that had happened to us there was that this flight, which seemed so anonymous, this anonymous space, here we are. I was so inspired by the poem. There we are, we're up there, and there's a kind of a freedom, right, that happens when you're up in the air. And then all of a sudden we were not anonymous. We were 180-something people, very frustrated with one another, in a hotel, marooned, not knowing when we could go home. And the strangest thing kept happening, which is that I was the only person who had a phone charger, and I would cross the lobby, and people were like, "There's the girl with the phone charger, go after her." And then someone figured out, they were like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "Oh, my mother, geez, Samina Qureshi." And "Oh, you're Samina Qureshi's daughter, why'd you tell me that before?" And so suddenly I had this identity, and I would go upstairs to my mother, who was hiding, and I would say, "Mama, I met the most amazing people in the lobby. I met this guy, and he knew you, and then he also knew your brother, and he went to high school with your, She was like, "Oh, I've been trying to lose that guy for 30 years. And it kept happening. And so I kept thinking about sort of, well, here's this community in the sky, and then we land, and what happens? This story is drawn from that experience, but not from my own experience. I began to think about that pilot and his calm voice as we were descending over Paris. I'm going to read you 2 short sections from a new story, which I began in this room, those many years ago. And it's entitled, Bienvenue, PIA, Flight 723. It was 5 a.m. local time, and Charles de Gaulle was empty except for the cleaners, a group of sleepy, miserable-looking chaps dragging brooms and buckets. Captain Vajidali and his crew were met at the gate by the PIA country manager for France, a tall man with a pained expression on his face. The name came to him, Harris Khalid. Nice fellow, maybe a little anxious. Vajidali noticed that Harris was wearing a camel hair coat, an expensive-looking thing. Must be nice living in Europe. Were we really grounded by a volcano? Vajidali asked, accepting Harris's firm handshake. There's no bomb? No bomb, Harris confirmed, his mustache twitching with the news. Volcanic ash cloud. Difficult to say when it'll be safe to fly again. The trouble is what to do with the passengers. We can't very well leave them all here in the airport. Harris turned and began to walk briskly down the long hallway, motioning Vajidali and the others to follow him. The flight attendant's heels clicked on the smooth surface of the shiny, dark floor. Vajidali wished he could change out of his dress shoes. You don't mean we're going to put all the passengers up in Paris? Vajidali asked, trying to keep up with Harris's quick pace. Every one of them? There were 147 passengers in all those carrying the dreaded green Pakistani passport would need emergency visas to disembark in Paris. What a goddamn headache. Harris nodded, grimacing as if he was suffering from constipation. Let me see that list, Vajidali asked. It wasn't unusual for him to see people he knew on the passenger manifest. Everyone flew PIA. But later he would ask himself why he had chosen to scan the list of names at that moment. There it was, clearly printed on the first page of the business class section. Saeed, Farah S, 6B. Farah Saeed was not an uncommon name. It was possible that this was some other unfamiliar Farah. But he felt a sinking sensation somewhere below his ribs, a prickle of truth. In all these years, he had never had her on a flight. He handed the list back to Harris. And this is from a moment later in the story, after the characters have settled into a very strange week in the hotel. In the center of the lobby was a small bar where a group of men in white shalwar kurtas were huddled over stacks of porcelain cups and saucers, swapping predictions for the Pakistani cricket team. They were the sort of men who could be thrown into any sort of situation and be relied upon to drink tea and talk about cricket. Nearby, a large flat-screen television was permanently tuned to CNN's coverage of the ash cloud's progress, reports on the thousands of people sleeping in airport waiting areas across the UK and Northern Europe. A rotating group sat listening and repeating what the reporters said to one another, a constant chorus of complaint. By the front exit were 3 elderly aunties in cotton saris and wool cardigans, you know the look, watching people walk in and out of the lobby like tennis spectators at Wimbledon. In the hotel dining area, a dozen well-coiffed women were gathered as if they were about to play bridge. Vajidali knew the type. These were the matrons of business class, frequent travelers in pastel-colored shalwar kameezes, matching wool shawls and diamond studs, softly shaded, plucked, and cosseted, swapping stories of personal inconvenience. And there, sitting at the edges of the group, sat Farah, clear as day. Vajidali smoothed down his hair and cracked his knuckles. How long had it been? 15, 18 years? And now what? The indignity of meeting like strangers in a hotel lobby. Just then, one of the women called out to him, raising a manicured hand in the air and beckoning him closer. Mrs. Jalil. He recognized her from the Karachi Gymkhana. Yoo-hoo, Captain Saab, she said, smiling. Have a seat with us. Mrs. Jalil nudged a chair in his direction with her stocking-covered foot. Vajidali stood instead of taking the chair, nodding quickly at the group and asking after their health. In truth, the women appeared robust, their lipstick freshly applied, their hair shellacked in place. We're a mess, Captain Saab, Mrs. Jalil announced gaily. When on earth are we getting out of here? Awful place. Yes, when? A silver-haired woman asked, clutching at her thick braid of seed pearls as if it were a safety rope. We have no clothes except the ones on our backs. Soon, inshallah, Vajidali replied. He glanced at Farah quickly. Couldn't read her expression or make out what she was thinking. He felt as if his heart was beating outside his chest. She looked well, he thought. Different, maybe. Her hair was cut short and boyish, dyed a light brown. She looked up, catching his glance, and gave him a short, vague, impersonal smile. It was her vagueness that pierced him most. Mrs. Saeed, he said to Farah, I trust you're keeping well. I am, thank you, Captain, she said, barely making eye contact. She gestured to the girl next to her. This is my daughter, Manaz. He'd never met any of her children. The girl looked 16 or 17 and wore her hair tied in a long braid, the way Farah used to wear hers. It was unnerving how much she looked like her mother once did. He wanted to tell her so, but stopped himself. Manaz returned her attention to the phone in her lap. He wished the ladies a good day, promising them news of their departure as soon as he had it. As he walked back across the lobby, he reviewed the interaction in his mind. He hid his bunched fists in his pockets. It hadn't been a disaster, not exactly, no. It was that Farah had treated him like someone she had met once, a long time ago. He needed time to think, time to compose himself. He went upstairs and lay down on his bed fully dressed, comforted by the anonymity of stiff sheets and flimsy blinds. For once, he felt grateful to be alone and unseen. Thank you so much.
Oh, and I should have mentioned Sadia's fabulous memoir, A Girl from Foreign, is also being sold, as is the T-Bone series and Dulani's co-edited anthology, The Revolution Starts at Home, because it does. I I met Dulani when you were just a teenager. And it was at a YSS retreat. Any YSSers in the house? It was at a YSS retreat post 9/11, and I think we had just been like, we need to gather, we need to get together. I never even did YSS. Somehow I was there. I don't even know. And I met Dulani that there, and I just knew we were family from that moment on, and I couldn't have imagined a reading, a launch without you here. So thank you so much for being here.
Hi. Wow. Yes, I remember that retreat. That was in January of 2002, and Bushra made me this little. Do you remember those paper fortune teller things? And there were all these fun affirmations in there, like "You're not crazy," and I was like, "How did she know I needed to hear that?" So, so yeah, I was like, "This is great." I'm super honored to be here. I love Bushra a lot, and yeah, and I love the Asian American Writers Workshop. It's a very, very, very important space. Cool. Okay, I'm gonna read some poems. So yeah, this first one is called White Chiffon Lies. That first trip on Air Emirates was in 1987. We flew through white clouds over white waves for Jyoti Didi's wedding. My memory mostly faded except for that Bollywood hit, Mr. India, fantastical on the big screen. Jyoti Didi was the real life star. Maroon lipstick, long black hair, regal even in her cotton kurta, feminine affection that made me trust womanhood, sisterhood, future. Fast forward to 1993, my second flight from Pittsburgh to Chandigarh, this time to settle down so that I lived my adolescent girlhood in the homeland. This time I met Jyoti Didi's daughters, lanky Pinku and cheeky Omna, their smiles, white stars, their laughter, the yellow burst of a white daisy. Those middle school years in India, I went to more weddings, adjusted to white hawk aunties, the OG surveillance system. As if it was our fault that every bus, every street, every theater bloomed with molestation. We were nothing more than white roses they picked to toss aside, pink and gold pageantry from the womb to the law of in-laws, ceremonies of smothering haldi to lighten, whiten, brighten skin. Every hair follicle stood trial as bride currency was clocked from birth. The solution was to abort. Jyoti Didi's in-laws did not want a third granddaughter. I was 11 or 12 or 13 when I hunched on the sterile white sheet, sobbed white hot tears at Jyoti Didi's feet. She wept more quietly, her hair braided, sat over her right shoulder, her brother scolding me for this display of emotion, teaching me how disruptive the truth is. This piece is called Reflections on Resistance. It's in 3 parts. 1. My mother asked me if I believed God was in everyone. She prays every day in the morning, sings a devotional song with her eyes closed and hands folded. I think about the 9 killed in the church in Charleston, the 6 killed in a mosque in Quebec. I think about my father, his debilitating depression, how this country breaks the brokenhearted. I have this recurring dream that I'm going to go to India. I haven't been back in 19 years. The dream is blue-gray sky, airport. I always miss my flight. I find it comforting that my mother prays, but I don't answer her question. 2. I remember when the officer came to the window, my dad's stiff, face frozen, the pain of 5 herniated discs in motion. Officer asshole said with his eyes, "You're lying." I was a child in the passenger seat, witnessing. 3. 36 of us carried coffins across the Brooklyn Bridge after the jury responded to Eric Garner's last breath with, "You're lying." Arms locked on the bridge, blocking traffic, resistance singing in the cold night air. I can hear my brother crying, I can't breathe. Now I'm in the struggle saying I can't leave. Calling out the violence of these racist police. We ain't gonna stop until our people are free. We ain't gonna stop until our people are free. They filmed our breath, tore up the coffins, tightened our cuffs, searched me, asked about my parts, smirked, male, female, what are you? I said, where are we? They said, in the devil's den. This is, I think my last piece. It's new. My mother in America. My mother called me 7 days before her flight. Tells me her right eye is flickering. It's a bad omen, she says. Worry stuck to her voice like shiny black tar. She utters trepidation after trepidation. My passport says born in Pakistan. And did you hear about that Indian man in Kansas they killed? People think I'm Mexican or Iranian. They don't care. They don't realize until after the fact. I make a sound like maybe there is shiny black tar in my throat, like I understand why her suitcase is packed 7 days in advance, like I know in my bones that I can't protect her from the thick, sticky toxicity of America.
Hello, how's everybody doing? I am not going to read anything, so you don't have to worry. But I'm here to introduce the VIP of the night, and we're all VIPs. And I will echo what's been said before. This is a very, very important space. And I'm supposed to come up with some, a nugget, a story, a memory. There's too many, so I won't give you any. We did meet through the writer's workshop, sort of, because we met through Saucy, and then we were, okay. And then we were on a LIRR train, and we recognized each other, and we struck up a conversation, and I don't know, we talked about Queens probably, and the rest is history. So I have a few things to introduce before I introduce Bushra Rehman. Obviously, this is the launch party for her book, which was originally a homemade chapbook. So for all you writers out there, never give up. It's a square-bound book, which is also for sale amongst all the other books by all the other writers. There is a new edition of Colonize This, which is a seminal anthology of it's not even fourth, it's like nth wave feminism. And there's another edition of Corona printing, and there's still room in her class. She's my teacher. I've taken the class twice. So without further ado, Bushra Rehman.
Actually, I don't even have my phone, but I do want to take a picture of all of you. Wow, so where to even start? There are people here tonight that I've known since I was born, from high school, from college, from everywhere. This is probably what my funeral would look like, I imagine, if I died. But luckily, this is more of a celebratory event. I don't know actually how you really feel about me, but so I thought that I would start with one of the oldest poems. Oh, and I don't even know where the live streaming is happening. I kept pretending it wasn't happening because I'm afraid my family will watch this. But I know that Seth and Brian are out there, the publishers of Sibling Rivalry Press. Let's give them a hand. Sibling Rivalry. And I'm not just saying that because they publish my books that no one else will publish, but because they're fabulous. They've done so much amazing work, and I don't know where you are, guys, but thank you. And I wanted to dedicate, this is one of Brian's favorite poems, and it's a favorite that I've had. It's called Book Bag Stolen March 14th. I'm gonna be reading some oldies and newbies. And for those of you who are like, I heard this 20 years ago, what I've realized is that a new generation of people can be born in 20 years. So, some of you may not have heard this, but it is for all the travelers, the runaways, all the misfit children, maybe there's a handful in the audience, who had to leave home, you know, and who had to leave their families and create another life. A life, when I took that leap, I had no idea what the hell was out there, and it turned out all of you, so thank you. This is called Book Bag Stolen March 14th, and it's when I was homeless and everything I owned was just in this one bag. Some people say it's dumb to get attached to things, but you know sometimes you really can't help it when you've got a thing and so many times it's been the only thing you've got. When you can turn to it and say, it's just you and me, kid, and then laugh a lot. You know, you're never really alone when you've got a thing you can carry around. When the thing itself carries your toothbrush, your socks, because you never know where you're going to end up. I mean, what are you supposed to do? How can you not get attached? When there's always a diary handy, condoms, pencils and pens, scraps of addresses of people to whom you never give a thought. Of course, you're always pulling the scraps up every time you're trying to get change for cigarettes or the bus or the toll-free number of your advisor in New York. But mostly change. The condoms just dust and rot. I mean, maybe my book bed heard me the day I was in David's garden and said, I'm going to stop moving around. I don't care about having adventures anymore. I just want a home and a garden, and I'm so tired that I don't even care that it sounds like a magazine. I said no more traveling, and I know my book bag heard me. Why else would it have disappeared? Somehow, though, it's been happening lately. My jeans wore out, my boots hurt when I walk, and my tie fell off in a Hardee's in Iowa, or somewhere where I jumped up and down in a net of plastic-colored balls on a half-hour rest stop somewhere some night. And I called long distance yesterday to mourn the loss. All of us old friends separate and falling off. Antidepressants, Valium, and marriage. Is it such a sin to be lonely, one asked? It is, I said, it is. I called them all. You know how it is. Some people say it's dumb to get attached to things, but you know sometimes you really can't help it. When you've got a thing, and so many times it's been the only thing you've got. Thank you. So, Ramzan Mubarak. I have no idea what time it is, so please eat your kajur and drink your water, and there will be food coming. But I wanted to read this poem called Idul Fitri. I think one of my favorite parts about, as much as I'm not practicing, but the Islamic culture is Chand Raat at the end of Ramzan when everyone's looking for that moon. Because when you see the moon, when you see the crescent moon, it means that it's going to be Eid the next day. And it's just like one of my favorite parts. And growing up in Queens, we had a very amazing tradition, which is basically you climb up to the rooftops. I guess this is not just in Queens, but to see if you can find the moon. This is called Eid al-Fitr. At night, the men climb up to the rooftops to see if they can see the moon. The sun sets first over the beaches of Brooklyn and then the meadows of Queens. The moon appears then, the small clip of a nail, a paring knife, a chalk mark left to linger in the sky. Always the sun set first, and like Allah's clockwork, the moon finds itself in our hands. It hangs low over buildings, jumps rope with telephone lines, hears the aunties calling each other to ask, has anyone seen the moon yet? Has anyone seen the moon? We'll be doing that in a few weeks, I guess. So, you know, my family, they they're actually in Saudi Arabia right now, so they might not be seeing this. But they often feel afraid of me sharing things about being Muslim, and it isn't because they're necessarily conservative or repressive. It's because they're afraid, And right now, people are afraid of being out as Muslim, and we live in really, really scary times. But everything I learned from community did come from my parents, who came here in the 70s and started a masjid in Queens and lived with beautiful tolerance with all their neighbors. And this poem is called Masjid, and it's dedicated to the creation of that masjid and our community in Corona. The minar and dome of our masjid took longer to grow than trees. Our fathers bought the land, then tilled it. Before that, it was a parking lot for the Jehovah's Witness. They sold it when the pamphlets weren't bringing in enough donations. Our fathers sowed the seeds then, Qurans and Janamazes. And in all my years, from when I was 4 to 16, I watched the walls go up. And then the dome grew the same pace my breasts did. The minar, too, grew to reach the heights of the Queen's sky, push up past the telephone lines, let itself poke up, respectful still of the Episcopalian church steeple next to it, the flat brick surface of the kingdom of the Jehovah's Witness. It was fine real estate for religion on National Street, a church, a kingdom, and a masjid, crammed next to each other, wall to wall and skin to skin. And if you crossed the street, there was a Catholic store selling crucifixes and paintings of women and men in hell burning. Maybe you have one of those at home. The sinners look like all of us. But I always thought that all of us in our agony looked like Jesus. So it turns out, thank you so much, and thank you for listening. It turns out that for a Muslim person, I say, "Oh, Jesus," a lot. And I realize this because, as you know, I have a 5-year-old. We have a 5-year-old. I don't know where Ben is. But, and so she said the other day, she was just like, "Oh, Jesus." And then I was like, "Did you just say, 'Oh, Jesus'?" And she's like, "No, oh, Jesus." So I love that. Now I'm just like, "Oh, Jesus." This try it. It's fun. Thank you, Jesus. This next poem is one that I decided to open the book with, and it was really hard. Like in 20 years, I was like editing, changing, constantly changing the order, as you poets know how hard it is to find the order of poems in a book. But then I decided to start with this one, and someone recently asked me. It's called Rapunzel's Mother, or a Pakistani Woman Newly Arrived in America. And it is because of the fairy tale of Rapunzel that you're familiar with, but most people don't realize that the reason she's even in that tower is because her mom was pregnant, wanted some vegetables in the witch's garden, not a nice neighbor to have, and the witch basically was like, "You must give me your firstborn child," and that was Rapunzel, and that's how she ended up there. And I think about the stories my mother used to tell me about hunger and how she lived with hunger and how hard her childhood was in that aspect. And how when she came here, she wasn't hungry anymore, but she did lose her children to this country in a way, or thinks that she did. So this is called, I already said the title, but Rapunzel's Mother, a Pakistani Woman Newly Arrived in America. With a cabbage, a box of eggs so clean, she could easily forget the source of their existence. My mother filled her silver cart and moved in line to make her purchase. The cashier turned a sharp glance at the small brown woman with a pierced nose and covered head. She didn't fit into this, an American supermarket. "And what," asked the cashier, "are you willing to pay for this?" She held the head of lettuce in the air. It reflected off her rhinestone glasses and the hairspray in her hair. "But this," said my mother, "is America. I thought there was no barter here." Said the cashier. "There's give and take all over the world. What made you think it would be different here?" She shook her head in her plastic hair. "But I have money." My mother tried to act like she didn't care. Her English broke all over her and fell apart in the air. But the cashier cackled, "No, no, no, my dear. What I want is here." And she pointed a nail, silver painted and crooked, at my young mother's stomach, which I had just begun to share. "That's the price you'll have to pay, my dear, for this fresh lettuce. Each egg that erupts into a new-blown head shall be the property of this here supermarket, country, and nation. And don't even think of running, because we've got the goods on you. Along with every other immigrant, we've got your passport, your foreign passport right here." She made to reach into her too-tight jeans, but my mother, she ran out of there. The shopping girl openly laughed behind her, and the lines and lines of customers just stood there with their stupid grins. My mother ran, but she still found herself in a foreign land, far away from home. Thank you. I'm gonna do two more. I'm gonna do two more, and I mean, how could I be in this space without reading "Will Heaven Look Like Zinat Aman"? Pull out your lighters. Thank you, because I was like, people are like not gonna want to hear this poem again. But it's been a while. So for those of you who don't know who Zinat Aman is, she was this fabulous, fabulous Bollywood actress. From Kurbani, just Google Kurbani songs and you'll know what I'm talking about. And you know, it's about when I was growing up, one of the things. So you know, my parents are religious, but when I think back on the movies they were watching when I was a child, I was like, this is soft porn. These Bollywood movies from the 80s are no joke. I mean, what the hell? Why were they showing this to me? It kind of explains a lot. Will Heaven Look Like Zinat Aman? Oh, and my mom from my uncle's store used to make bootleg copies so he could sell them for like $1 and make some extra money. So, and for those of you who don't know VCR culture, you can't just copy and paste something. You have to play that movie from beginning to end to copy it. So those movies were on constant repeat in my childhood. Will Heaven Look Like Zinat Aman? My mother used to tape Indian movies illegally all day long. There'd be 3 or 4 movies going, 2 VCRs whirring, their frequencies all turned on by that subtle pre-orgasmic flurrying that filled every lovesick song. And it filled me, so that even as a child, loving and kissing were in my dreams. And I could never quite walk from point A to point B, but would instead jump and bounce, humming something about eyes looking like oceans or the sea in a storm. And at night before going to sleep, I'd think about the kids who went to kindergarten with me and imagine all sorts of adventures and all sorts of dances and songs. But my mother, she's different now. She faces Makkah, not Namak Halal. And although she's still singing verses from the Quran, it's not the same. There isn't any kind of tingling in my feet or my gut. When I go home, I wrap my dupatta around me. My mother hugs me in between prayers. She doesn't get off her janamaz. But I remember her being different. I remember her smiling or angry, but always something, at least something that felt like lightning in a storm. That was her before. Now she's like a volcano rumbling as she sits there reading namaz. And I wonder if when her spirit passes, when her soul starts and leaves her body, and she goes to that place she'd rather be, will Muhammad look like Amitabh, or will heaven look like Zinat Aman? Thank you. And this will be the last poem. And then we're going to have food and music and hanging out. And I can finally relax and say hi to you all properly, which I'm excited about. This is called Meteors, and it really is about, especially now that I work a lot with youth, and you know, when some of them are thinking about like kind of going off on their own path and afraid of what their families are going to say, you know, I always say life is long, and you have no idea. That disownment door is a revolving door sometimes. You know, you're in, you're out, you're in, you're out. There's a very good chance I'll be out after this reading. But this poem is in hopes that I won't be, and it's dedicated to my family. It's called Meteors. To sleep all day in loving arms, or call my mother and hear her say, Bushra, I was just thinking of you right now. To sleep all day in loving arms, or spend the morning feeling the sun warm the linoleum, and looking out the window to think, I am dealing with Mother Nature. When I'm dealing with the weather, I'm not really missing out. I still get to see the moon with its many shades and its many shapes, and I still get to see the sun and have it light me up, all stars and warm. But I know I'm lucky because I get to go to the country, and I've seen the suns burn out and shoot across the dark, and how many suns there are. They say ours will burn out too, and I believe it, because haven't I seen them fall? Some real fast, some real slow, stars, meteors, and fireballs, until it seemed like there was nothing but stars or space or the light in between us. And that even she and me were only a tiny part, but that love was the light that moved between us, that would move on without us, that would always shoot across our dark. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. I can't believe this has finally happened. After so many months of planning and wow, thank you all the people who flew out, who came out, who got babysitters, everything. So we're gonna have food, we're gonna have music. Rekha doesn't even need any introduction. The fabulous DJ Rekha of the Basement Bhangra and the Bollywood and the BTR. But I think that we're gonna start. Yeah, we're gonna start. We need some minutes to set up. We're gonna clear off the space to make a dance party room. The food is gonna arrive. There's books, there's wine, and come say hello, especially if we didn't get to before.